welcome back. And with VCF East fully over, it's time to start getting ready for VCF Southwest. And the party piece that I want to have display at Southwest is this. This is my Mini-Centurion that I built for actually VCF East last year. And we had a CPU6 in it, a 128K memory card, a Disk 1, Disk 2 controller card, and a 4-port MUX. The disk controller cards were controlling a CDC Hawk drive, but that drive gave us a proper runaround, and we ended up having to build it as a fixed platter only drive. There was no removable disk in it, so we only had 5 megabytes and half the number of heads that we should have had. But it all seemed to work really well, and we had a full operating system on it. And we stuffed all of that into this cabinet, which I built to look like the original single Hawk only cabinets that Centurion was building in the early 1970s. And on top of it, we had an ADS Regent 40. But a lot of stuff has changed since then. This is not an ADS Regent 40 data terminal. This is not the same Hawk drive. And we don't even have the same CPU6 and memory card down in the card cage anymore. Everything is different, and it's all sitting here in an unknown state. None of the pieces work with each other at the moment. So where did all of these new pieces and dramatic changes come from? Well, there's a school up in Cincinnati called Butler Tech, and it's a pretty amazing high school with an unbelievable setup for the students there. I actually wish my high school was as awesome as Butler Tech was. And the person that's running the IT department in that school is Mr. Hall, and I absolutely love hanging out with Mr. Hall. I just love chatting with him and hearing all of his stories. But Mr. Hall also happens to have a Desk System Centurion for the students to play with. However, when I first met Mr. Hall and I first saw the Desk System Centurion, it wasn't working because the Centurion is such a weird, obtuse system. Nobody really knew how to bring it up. So my goal was to try and get that system up and going. And my first stab at it was unsuccessful. The Hawk drive gave us the proper runaround, and we didn't really have a good way to test the CPU and memory card in it. So I brought the CPU, memory card, disk controller card, brought all of that back down here to Texas, tested it out, and it was known working. But it wasn't a CPU6, it was a CPU5 with a 32K memory card. Now, I really wanted to get that desk system up and going, but with them having a CPU5 and me only having a CPU6, it was going to be hard to provide support if something were to go wrong. And so we had this crazy idea of maybe doing an old swapperoo. So I would hold on to the CPU5 and 32K memory card, and I would take the CPU6 and 128K memory card out of this Mini-Centurion, and I would take the Hawk drive, which had a known good operating system install on it, all the way up to Cincinnati and get that installed in the desk system. And we did that last year and actually got the system up and working. Kind of. A bad ribbon cable actually blitzed a little bit of our operating system install. And so unfortunately right now the system is still not working. And Mr. Hall, if you're watching, I have not forgotten about you. We are currently developing software to transfer disk images from the Hawk to a laptop and from a laptop back onto the Hawk so we can restore the disk image that we accidentally blitzed with a bad ribbon cable. So that is going to happen this year. I promise you, we will have a full proper working install on that system. But what that means for this Mini-Centurion here is that we don't know if this Hawk drive is any good. So we have 3 large hurdles that we have to tackle before this system is ready for VCF Southwest. The first is that we need to get that Hawk drive up and going, then get all of the hardware plugged into it and make sure that everything's playing nice with each other. The second is that this data terminal on top is an ADS Regent 200 that we got from the awesome guys up at VCF. But it happens to have a firmware bug, I believe. Anything above 4800 baud and the screen flickers like crazy. And I've had a couple of people tell me that that's a firmware problem with this specific terminal. So we got to try and figure out how to fix that because the Centurion defaults to 9600 baud. And finally, we need to make it look better. After driving all the way up to VCF East with this in the back of the truck and then driving out to VCF Southwest, it's gotten a little beat up. The vinyl that I used to make a kind of faux wood pattern on top of here is peeling off and looks absolutely horrendous. The side panels are wood and don't look quite right, and cosmetically it just needs some help. So that's what we're going to work on. We're going to try and tackle all three of those things before VCF Southwest, and I think we're going to start with the cosmetics. I want this thing looking brand spanking new before we show up at VCF. And well, the first step of that is going to be getting all of the wood panels off of this and starting to cover them properly with some real deal laminate. All right, let's get to work. Starting by getting the data terminal out of the way, and we're going to deal with that in a later episode. But then I need to slip the wooden side panels off so I can get access to all of the gubbins on the inside. And next I want to remove the front wood trim pieces, and they're held on with 4 screws through some custom brackets. And with those removed, it just falls right out. Next I need to get the top off. It's bolted down to the StarTech frame through these brackets that have 4 bolts each. 16 bolts is a lot of bolts, but it means the top panel doesn't budge when moving the machine around, and you often move it around by grabbing the top panel. With these removed, the top pulls right off, and now I can get to work on fixing the atrocious vinyl. After 2 events, one on the other side of the country, the vinyl did not survive gracefully, so I need to rip it all off and get something better on. Getting the vinyl off was simultaneously a pain in the butt, but also sometimes super easy, like this piece here, which just peeled off without any fuss at all. The vinyl across the top put up more of a fight though. It kept tearing, meaning that I couldn't pull large swaths of it off in a single go. I suppose that's to be expected though. At the end of the day, it is just vinyl. Eventually I got there though and got all the vinyl fully removed from the MDF underneath. And next I needed to make sure that that MDF was clean from all the glue residue of the vinyl, which means the old sander had to come out, and I gave it a good once over. After I was pretty happy with it, let's unroll what I'm going to replace the vinyl with. And this is a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of Prestige Walnut Formica laminate. Formica is the brand name, but laminate is about 7 layers of special papers and synthetic resins. It's usually used for high-wear places like countertops, so it has to be tough as nails, which makes it the perfect wood grain on a machine that's going to be traveling around to shows. I need to slice off a piece of it to make it easier to work with because a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet is huge. So I start by measuring how tall it needs to be, and then I have no idea how you cut this stuff. I'll just start with some metal shears, and at first it seemed to be going well, but well, you can see the drawback of laminate right here. It's prone to chipping and cracking when not glued down. Next, I put a board down to use as a straight edge and went to town with a razor blade, and this did not work. Laminate is just incredibly tough, which is great, but I gotta find a better way to cut it. And ultimately, we had to clamp it to the side of the table and attack it with a jigsaw. We turned the speed way up and took the bite all the way out and just worked our way slowly across the laminate. This is definitely how you're supposed to cut this stuff because this worked perfectly. With all the pieces cut out, we need to get them glued to the MDF, and for this we used contact cement. You paint it onto both surfaces and let it dry for about 15 to 20 minutes. So I'll just set my timer here. And after the glue has gone off, it's time to carefully lay the piece down. Contact cement is no joke. That stuff bonds instantly and very strong. But once in place, we run over it with a rubber roller to really seal the deal. Of course, this piece that we just glued down is too big and needs to be trimmed back, and so to do this, we just use our router with a trim bit. These bits have a little bearing on the end that prevents the router from taking too big of a bite. After running the router around all 4 sides, it just needs a little cleanup around the seams, and there we go, looking absolutely spectacular. For the top panel, it's really just a big rinse and repeat of those front trim panels, only everything is way larger. So while we let the time lapse go, let's talk about some news. First, you can probably hear it in my voice, I'm feeling much better. I'm not fully over whatever con crud I caught at VCF East, but I'm nearly there, thank all of the gods. Also coming up on the 17th of this month, which is like 2 weeks away, we have an open house happening at System Source Museum in Maryland. Come hang out, it'll be a ton of fun, and I think we're even going to get the original Apple I out. Finally, I'm working on a little live stream podcast type thing behind the scenes. We're getting ready to get the ball rolling on that one, and I think I'm going to try and stream it live on Twitch every Friday, and then release a slightly edited version of the stream on Wednesdays here on the main channel. Hopefully there's more to come on that soon, so keep your eyes and ears peeled for that one. All right, it looks like Past Me is wrapping up the top, and boy, does it look good. Next up, let's address this color mismatch here. I initially just guessed on the blue color, and I got it way wrong. But I've got some paint that I think will be much closer now, and in order to paint that on there though, we need to get this front panel off, and we start by just unplugging the ribbon cables. Then we remove the 2 through bolts that hold it in place, and with those out of the way, it just pulls right off, revealing that underneath it really is just a standard StarTech 19-inch rack. Next, I need to strip the front panel so I can repaint it. The LED panel is held on with 4 bolts, and the switch panel is held on with 2 nuts. And then with those removed, it just pulls right out. So once the panel is stripped completely, I need to give it a good sand, and I don't want to rip it all the way back to raw steel because, well, because I'm lazy. I just want to key up the existing paint well enough for new paint to stick to it. And I'll put down a new coat of flat gray primer, which should make the new color stick better. Then while that dries, I'll mix up the new paint, and I just need to thin it out, mix it up, and then pour it into my spray gun. And I'm using the bed of our Suzuki Samurai here as a mixing table. Then we just spray the new color right on down. Unfortunately though, the weather was not playing nicely, and while it was drying, I went inside to play some video games, and it started to rain, which kind of ruined the whole thing, so I had to do this entire process all over again, but I eventually got there. And now that it's dry, let's repopulate it and pop it back onto the machine. And with it bolted down, we can now slide the newly finished wood top back on, and man alive, what an improvement. All right, that's coming together really, really well. The new laminate here looks fantastic. The color is not quite perfect, but so close that I don't think you can hardly tell, and the wood grain is identical to the type of wood grain that is on the original, so it looks like a proper original Centurion built top and front panels here. Came out looking absolutely amazing. The front panel here with all the lights on it, man, the color just didn't quite come out right. It's supposed to be color matched. I carried this lower panel in and they color matched the paint at the local hardware store, but well, you can see it's a little too light of a blue, but I think this will work for now. It's a lot better than it was before, and I want to rebuild this whole front panel anyways to be closer to what the original CPU4 style front panel would have been, which is an entire singular row along the bottom of LEDs instead of these kind of vertical columns here. But we're not going to do that before VCF Southwest. I think this is going to work just fine for Southwest. There is one more piece of the puzzle that we're missing though, and that is the side panels. I originally built the side panels out of MDF, and it's just painted wood, but that's not right. It doesn't look right either. And at VCF East last year, when I had the Mini-Centurion first on display, I met up with a good friend of mine, John, and John just so happens to run a metal fab shop up in Massachusetts called Kad Industries. They do pretty insanely good work, and despite the distance between Texas and Massachusetts, they're pretty much going to be my go-to for all metal fabrication going forward. That's how good they are. But John wanted to contribute to the Mini-Centurion project since he had seen it in person, and I said, you know, I really need some proper side panels for this. And well, John built up these big guys. Now these are powder coated, but the color isn't quite right. You'll notice it's a bit darker than the original color that's on the Centurion here, but that's not on John, that's on me. I sent him the wrong color. That's 100% my fault. The quality though is insanely good. I mean, on this side it looks just like a flat piece, but if you look at the corners here, they're beautifully rounded, properly welded, and you can't even see the seams. It is stunning how well built these side panels are. It seems really strange to get super excited about a square piece of metal, but this is really good. I appreciate properly designed and engineered and built things, and this is that 100%. So John, thank you so much for these. Now we just got to figure out how to get these mounted onto the side here. And you built some pretty epic mounts for that. So let's pull those out and see if we can get these properly mounted. The new mounts are going to bolt directly to the chassis and to the wooden top. So I need to remove the bolts where they're going to go. Then I'll hold the mount in place and tighten it down with the bolts that I just removed. Now the alignment didn't quite work out as perfectly as I wanted on the rear top mount here, which means that I needed to spacer it out a bit, which is what I'm doing here by putting the bolt in and tightening it down with an extra nut. Then I'll slip the second mounting plate over my spacer bolts and cinch it down into place. I'm only using 2 bolts here in order to get it all aligned correctly, but I think it'll be plenty strong. Next, on the top mount for the front, I need to actually remove the bracket that holds the top in place. The new side panel bracket will serve double duty, holding the side panel as well as the top. I'll slip the new metal bracket into place and cinch it down with the through bolts. The alignment on this one worked out much better, so I don't need any spacers on this second bracket. I just pop them into place and tighten them down once I've got them all properly aligned. I need to actually connect the brackets to the top panel to hold everything tight, which means I gotta drill new holes, and that's gonna make a mess. I had the vacuum running, but still, I had to go through and clean it all again anyways. But then I can repurpose the bolts that I just removed that held the original back bracket in place. Finally, on the bottom, I need something to hold the side panel at the right distance. I'll use another one of these brackets that John made, but turned 90 degrees. I'll set the second bracket on top and cinch it down nice and tight. This should create an easy way to hold everything in place. And here's all 3 mounts all finished up and tightened down. This should work absolutely perfectly to hold those panels. Speaking of which, let's get one panel and see how it works. It just pops right in, no problems, and fits perfectly. The upper brackets slot into a notch cut into the panel. This not only holds them in the right place, but also aligns the panel correctly front to back. On the bottom, the bracket grabs the back edge of the panel and prevents it from flopping around. That all came out really well. Let's button up the rest of the machine by bringing that beast of a terminal back over, and after plugging everything together and flipping the power switch, heck yeah, the D equals prompt. Only the Centurion can make me happy to see error. There we go, all back together, and my God, it looks absolutely stunning. These side panels are perfect. Thank you so much, John. This is it came out amazing. And those coupled with the new laminate that's on the front panels here and the side, this machine looks almost as good as it would have if it were built by Centurion themselves. As I mentioned earlier, the only thing cosmetically left lacking is this front panel right here. But there's something pretty important to notice about that front panel, and that's that all of the blinking lights are currently on. And the terminal says D equals H0 error. This means that the CPU5 card and the 32K memory card are both good and working because we have booted into the bootstrap ROM that is on the backplane. This machine is just waiting on the hard drive for it to come up and be fully working 100%. And that's what we got to get into next. This Hawk drive down here is completely unknown. I do believe that it has not had a head crash, so that could save us a ton of headache in bringing it up. There is data on the fixed platter that we have not seen or dumped, so there's going to be a lot of discovery going on with that. But man, for now, I cannot state how amazing this thing looks. And the camera may not convey the difference between the previous iteration and this iteration, but in person, it is absolutely stunning. And that's actually something that I need to talk about, because if you want to see this machine in person, you can do so at VCF Southwest. And I don't know, it's been a long day. I don't remember what the exact dates of it are, so I'm just gonna put big text up here that says VCF Southwest, these dates. come hang out in Dallas with us at VCF Southwest at these dates. It's one of the greatest retro computing events in the country, and this machine is gonna be there. Not only that, I'm gonna take this extra Hawk drive back here with me, and I think on the Friday of the event, we're gonna try and get that Hawk drive up and going as well. So we could potentially have two 14-inch Hawk drives up and running at that event. Could be pretty wild and pretty epic to see. So definitely come hang out with us at VCF Southwest. I am so excited about having my little Mini-Centurion back. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode.